policies that you have in your packet. And the main goal of today is really to get your feedback on the goals and policies. So I'll start with a little bit of elaboration of the background that Graham just provided, just to bring us all to the same page and make sure you have all the relevant technical and engagement information. But my main goal will be to walk us through the draft goals and policies and pause and facilitate a conversation among you. So please be prepared to engage today. Uh, a little background, as you know, so Scott and Graham have presented to you before, so hopefully you feel well grounded in what the climate element is. But a quick background is that you are required under HB 1181, which was passed in the early 2020s, to establish a climate element as part of your updated comprehensive plan. And there are two sub-elements that are required. So on the screen is showing a resilient sub-element. And this is to help the county be resilient to identified climate and extreme weather related hazards. So what the specific requirements are that you have to have at least one climate resilience goal and policy per identified climate hazard. And I'll talk a little bit more about those. But in general, in Spokane County, that includes wildfire, wildfire smoke, extreme heat, and changing precipitation, meaning less rain in winter, or sorry, less rain in summer, drought, and more extreme precipitation events in winter. You also need attention within each of the 11 commerce identified priority sectors as they relate to Spokane County. And that includes things like agriculture, buildings, land use. And then you also need attention to vulnerable populations. And the state guidance is a bit general on that, but in Spokane County, it can include people who are more at risk from some of those extreme weather events. So that includes elderly folks, low-income members, young children below the age of 5 who are more susceptible to wildfire smoke, outdoor workers like farm workers who are exposed to heat and smoke, things like that. So you need to have some policies addressing some of their vulnerabilities. Also, yep, thanks for the timing. The other sub-element is the greenhouse gas emissions reduction one. And this one, unlike the resilience one, includes a very explicit state target that all planning jurisdictions are required to align with, and that is to reduce your emissions, both total in Spokane County and per capita or per person by 95% by 2050. That is a pretty aggressive goal, 24 years to get there. I'll walk you through a little bit about how we see that as feasible in Spokane County and statewide. And other requirements are there you need to address within your greenhouse gas emissions sub-element, mitigation strategies, meaning strategies to reduce carbon pollution in transportation, buildings and energy, and zoning and development. You also need to demonstrate that policies will reduce vehicle miles traveled, the BMT, in part because that's a significant portion of the statewide carbon pollution metrics. So I say all this to ground you, and those are the requirements. This slide, Graham and Scott spoke a little bit to some of this, but we were brought on about a year ago in late 2024, so early 2025, to do a bunch of background technical analysis and engagement support to help develop a well-grounded data-informed climate element. And this slide is just summarizing some of that background work that has been shared with you or is in the appendix of the climate element, and I'll just highlight a little bit about it today. So first, we started by auditing your existing comprehensive plan and other related plans for the county to see what you had on the books already. And you did already have some existing policies that met state requirements. So we simply have reused those or amplified or modified them and then filled in the gaps. We also completed a climate vulnerability assessment that I'll talk more about on the next page. And this mentions partner towns, so that those are shown on the map here. As part of the grant effort, we've been collaborating with the 8 towns identified on the map. And so in addition to providing technical analysis for you at the county, we've also been completing short vulnerability assessments and drafting climate elements for those small towns. So that has been a good relationship building effort and ensuring that the county and the small towns are synced up and aligned in terms of their climate element planning. The third note is we completed a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and I'll share some highlights about that. The idea of the climate vulnerability assessment and greenhouse gas emissions inventory is that they provide the data to ground your climate element in science and in information. And then any good planning process also includes engagement. And so we have supported the county in some engagement efforts around the comprehensive planning process more broadly and more specifically to develop the climate element. Graham already spoke in depth about the Climate Policy Technical Advisory Board, and that has been a very robust and engaged working group that has deeply informed and shaped the climate element. And in addition to that, we also participated in some workshops held in winter and spring 2025 about broader comprehensive planning issues. We had a climate-specific station and activity and heard from folks about their experience with climate and extreme weather events and their priorities for action. We also conducted a survey, as Graham mentioned, and received over 450 responses, and I'll share some highlights of that. And then just a little continuing on the partner town relationships that I mentioned earlier, we have been presenting to their planning commissions and their elected officials as it varies by structure in the towns of what those are called. And some have begun adopting them and others are in the process. So we're coming to you around the same time it's happening with these other towns. So that's the background project. And now I'm going to dive a little bit into the technical analysis. So to inform the greenhouse gas emissions sub-element, we completed an inventory of your carbon emissions in the county. And this graphic here shows the highlights that in 2022, you had over 5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. And the main takeaways on this slide are that the main contributors to greenhouse gas emissions in the county are built environment. So that's your land use patterns and your buildings, including residential, commercial, industrial, office, et cetera. So their use of electricity and energy. And then transportation and other mobile sources up 46%. So that's, fossil fuel vehicles and buses and et cetera moving around the county. So together, those top two comprise, nearly 3/4 of your greenhouse gas emissions. And a big takeaway for there is in your climate element, then to achieve the statewide targets, it will be important to have goals and policies specifically addressing buildings, land use, and transportation. That also is required by the state for that reason, and it's grounded in this science. The inventory also showed some other more modest sources of GHG or greenhouse gas emissions in your county, and that includes from solid waste and wastewater processing, refrigerants, and then land use. In this case, land use refers to agriculture and forest land. And so a big contributor under the land use one is loss of forest cover, both on working in rural lands and also in more urbanized and suburban contexts. So we did note a trend in reduction of forest cover in Spokane County, or tree cover, I should say. And for that reason, you'll see some goals and policies around protecting and expanding that tree cover. Also under land use is agricultural practices. A lot of that is outside of the purview or influence of the county itself, but the county could play a role in supporting agricultural producers in adopting lower emission practices, including in their equipment and in their maintenance practices and transportation and all that. So you'll see some goals and policies around supporting food systems actors and agricultural producers. So thank you, Graham, for the next slide. I'm moving us along because, again, as I mentioned, I want us to focus on conversation, but I want you to have enough background. So this slide is a little complicated, but what it's trying to show is the trajectories that could get you to that 95% below target by 2050. So if you follow the red dotted line on the bottom, that would be going from about today to get to there. And what this is called a wedge tool. And what this is showing is to achieve that ambitious target, the county would really need an all hands on deck approach. It would need it would need a wide range of policies. Let me walk a little bit through there. The black dashed dotted line on top shows if you did nothing right now, if Spokane County kept its same approach, and if there were no federal or state or other requirements, what would happen in the future with modest population growth and just continued practices is you would actually increase your greenhouse gas emissions. But we do know the kind of green and blue colored wedges show existing federal, state, and regional policies or ones that are coming online that you'll be held to follow. And those include new energy code requirements, Clean Building Act, federal vehicle regulations, Washington Clean Fuel Standards, and you can see the rest. So under those, if you follow those just by Spokane County and its residents and community members adhering to those new laws, you'll reach what the pink line shows. And so you'll reach a pretty good reduction, but it won't get you all the way there. So it's between the pink line and the red dashed line where we're really looking for new goals and policies that amplify beyond the existing federal and state requirements that are county specific so that you can get at additional actions. And those include ones in the built environment and transportation, as I mentioned, and some modest ones in solid waste.
Can
So,
I ask a question?
yes, go ahead, please do.
This is Lonnie Edwards. Um, can you define more about the Clean Building Act and what that entails in there and what you're proposing on, how we can get to these numbers? Just a little bit more on the Clean Building Act.
Sure. I'm going to just pull it up over here. I will say, just to clarify, those codes, acts, standards, policies between the black dash line and the pink line are not ones Cascadia is proposing. They are ones that already exist, and or are coming online or are proposed in some way. So they aren't ones we are suggesting. They're just ones that you will be implementing as part of state law. So I can drop the Washington Clean Building Act.
If I can, for
Go
just a
ahead,
minute.
Scott.
Think this, don't know if this is working or not. I think it is. Uh, if you look at the,
I'm just noting I don't hear anything, so I'm not sure if I should chime in.
try that. Well, that's better.
Yeah.
What I was pointing out is on that wedge diagram, Meg, the colors for the Washington Energy Code and the Clean Buildings Act, the net reduction that provides is very, very small on the wedge. It's above that federal vehicle color, and so you can see while those are state mandates that are being considered through the Building Codes Council and other things, they're by themselves, they have a pretty very small impact on the actual reduction.
Yeah. And one takeaway from this image is that no one intervention will achieve the greenhouse gas emission target overall. That's just not the way it will work. And we'll need that each individual intervention creates or contributes to a small contribution. There are some that are more impactful. You can see the Clean Cars, Washington Clean Cars one, and the Clean Energy Transformation Act that get at some of the larger sources. So, but you're right, Scott, that each of the additional federal and state policies contribute to an increasing wedge, but none on their own will get all the way there.
Any ideas how to get less miles traveled by
Yeah.
Washington state people? Us,
It's a really
like,
great question. We do
you
have
know,
some policies that try to get at that direction, but I hear you. A lot of Washington State is developed in such a way that people live in kind of a distance from places they need to go, that it's hard for them to get around in non-fossil fueled vehicles. So I guess yes, we do have some ideas. And some are, of course, the decarbonization of the transportation system. And by that, I mean transitioning vehicles away from fossil fuel sources to electric and other, which is a process well underway throughout the world, and becoming increasingly cost effective. And as we look 25 years ahead, seems very viable for both individual cars, fleet, uh, and trucks. So
and
one is
then how
decarbonizing
do
the
we how do
existing.
we power how do we power our electrical grid then to add more electrical vehicles? How do we do that?
Yep, these are all great questions.
How,
And
like with
mhm,
the lithium and then with all those other things, it can create a carbon footprint as well. How do we do that?
yeah. Yeah, thanks for these great questions. Well, I can say that in deep talks with the Vista and other utility providers, that they are very aware that expanding use of electrical vehicles, for example, will put additional burden on the grid, and that some of their interventions to work on that are demand response practices, which utilize the system to turn off certain users during high use time and others, and incentivize people to electrify during high use time. Of course, bringing more renewable production into the mix are kind of two big ways, and enhancing efficiencies throughout the system so as to reduce the overall net increase. But you do raise important points that there will be things to contend with as we transition to a more electrified economy. As for some of the life cycle parts you pointed out about lithium, and that's on the battery side. Indeed, it will take some resources to manufacture batteries and solar. So this is probably beyond Spokane counties, but it is important to consider those. And that hopefully there will be regulations requiring recycling and reuse of those and responsible extraction of those. And I will say, just from a pure greenhouse gas emissions perspective, the science is pretty clear. If we don't act to reduce our carbon pollution, hazards like wildfire, heat, smoke will continue to intensify. And so I think the trade-offs become choose another action to reduce our climate hazards, so that's some of the reasons here.
God, talk to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to keep us on track.
Yes.
Because but to put this in context, Dr. Horst is presenting the element in and of itself. These are findings based on the required state new element. In the comprehensive plan is where we will start to integrate these. So you ask about, vehicle miles traveled, how do we reduce that? We provide more housing closer to jobs instead of deferring housing to, defaulting housing to Post Falls and putting more cars on I-90. So these element attributes get worked into the other parts of the comprehensive plan to make those work better. This is not going to be a standalone academic exercise. The things you're talking about are going to be considered in that plan. And that balance is what will come back to you this summer to say, here's how the whole thing kind of sits on the scale, and how do you feel about those things? So, but today's effort is really to focus just on this and the element itself. So, the
yeah, and if I may,
asking,
let's continue. So that wedge tool was simply to show that we'll need to take actions beyond what's happening at the federal and state level. So it's simply to kind of underscore that we'll need to do a range of actions to get to the red dash line. So we've talked a little bit about what some of those will be. Some background material we also provided in the climate element is the climate vulnerability assessment. This slide is just showing the types of issues that we addressed in that assessment. And we looked at impacts to health and well-being, environment and water, built infrastructure, and to local communities. And you can review that vulnerability assessment in detail, but I will say some main risks and vulnerabilities pointed out and the health and well-being sector are, for example, extreme heat, particularly to elderly folks and low-income members who may not have access to air conditioning. In the environment and water, you are already noticing major changes to your water systems in Spokane County, to your rivers and streams. And of course, that affects both water availability and also agricultural use of water. So that's some of the impact. In terms of built infrastructure, there are risks, for example, from wildfire to housing and to energy infrastructure. And evacuation routes are somewhat limited due to your existing transportation corridors. Those are just some of the highlights we discuss in the climate vulnerability assessment. And the important thing as it relates to the climate element is when we get into the goals and policies to have kind of strategic goals and policies that try to minimize those risks. So next. We also did engage the community as much as we could in this process, and I'll just share a few highlights. Your community members, the nearly 500 who took the survey, expressed moderate to extreme concern about climate impacts like wildfire, smoke, heat, and drought. And they commented on impacts like they're having to stay indoors a lot, cancel outdoor events, facing mental and emotional stress, physical health impacts, and disruption to their utilities or inability to pay for rising costs. And then on the right, their top 3 priorities in terms of the resilience sub-element are protecting and enhancing natural areas, ensuring affordable and reliable energy sources, and investing in emergency preparedness. In terms of the top greenhouse gas emission reduction priorities, community members want to transition to renewable energy sources, ensure affordable housing, and as Scott was saying, want to see more land use patterns that encourage compact development, so housing near their other community services. So go ahead, Graham. Here's some open-ended comments. For time's sake today, I'll probably just point out one. the top left, we heard from a lot of people who expressed concern about a variety of climate impacts, such as the Spokane River running dry, air quality index being higher, wildfires, damaging windstorms, and community members are recognizing a big need to act on some of this. So go ahead, Scott. So that's just the background intended to give you a flavor of what the greenhouse gas inventory shows and what kinds of policy actions you would need to take to address that. The climate vulnerability assessment, which discusses some of the risks and hazards you're already experiencing. And now we get to goals and policies. So starting with the greenhouse gas emissions reduction ones, remember from an earlier slide that your main target in these goals is to achieve the state mandated goal of 95% below 1990 levels of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So all of these goals are meant to align deeply with that state target. There are 6 goals up here. I know it's a lot of words. You did receive the Word document of this in advance, so hopefully you have that in front of you and you can follow along. I will say the goal 1 is about transportation, goal 2 about energy production, goal 3 about energy efficiency, 4 on land uses around housing and compact development, 5 on more rural and working land uses, and 6 on waste and composting and recycling. So those are the 6 main categories. And now I'm going to walk us through each goal somewhat briefly today. I'll go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, this is your discussion prompt. And as we present the goal and set of policies in each one, for you to consider is, are they comprehensive? Is anything missing? Are they feasible? And then the temperature check, what I'd love to hear from Planning Commission today is, do you support this list? And if not, what we're looking for today is really specific edits. Since there's been a lot of work that has come into developing this set of goals and policies, it's been workshopped by the Climate Policy Technical Advisory Committee multiple times and by staff. We're looking for really concrete, specific reactions rather than, high level. And in terms of the question above, are they comprehensive? Is anything missing? I will tell you, we've done a robust review to make sure you'll meet state requirements that I walked through in the earlier slides, and that'll get you on target to at least move in the direction towards state targets. In terms of feasibility, we're aware that Spokane County does not have endless capacity and resources to do this, and is mandated to do some actions. So you'll note that a lot of our verb choices are very careful in that we choose words like partner with when we recognize that there are other partners that will have to be, for example, utilities that will have to be leading some of the efforts, in Spokane County's role may be to partner. Their other words are to do as feasible and support. So we're being attentive to the reality of resources and capacity. Go ahead to the next one. So this will be our practice one. There is a lot of text on the slide, and that's just to try to be comprehensive. Again, I hope you have the document in front of you. I will note too that in some cases the policies are actually longer than what's shown up there, and we just have the first sentence as our kind of to capture the overall sentiment. So goal 1 is about your transportation network, and it's to develop, maintain, and augment Spokane County's transportation network to reduce GHG emissions. Up there we have policies 1.1 on electric vehicle infrastructure, 2 on fleet electrification of the county, 1.3 on a network of greenways, bike paths, and lanes. 1.4 is to partner with transit agencies to maintain transit access and expand where feasible. And 1.5 is about collaborating with Spokane Regional Transportation Council around meeting or exceeding their VMT target and coordinating with other entities. So I'm moving through things quickly, but I'll pause and say what I'm looking for as we go around is a temperature check. Do folks find this a feasible, comprehensive list? And if not, what specific reactions do you have? So I'll pause and ask maybe Scott to do a quick walkthrough of the Plan Commission and see and hear from individuals.
Mr. Chairman, we welcome your thoughts and questions, and you are welcome to take any thoughts or questions from the public at any time.
No one online, okay. We have some people. Does that conclude the presentation?
Oh, no,
No.
we have much more to go. We're going to stop at the end of every one of the goals and ask for your thoughts and comments.
We have 2 people who want to speak on climate, but maybe we'll wait until all the information is
Yes.
presented. Thank you. Questions?
I'll just, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say I didn't get the letter from the committee. Maybe it's in our packet, but I couldn't find it. Um, okay, cool. I'll take a look there. Thank you for that. But hearing that the committee unanimously supported it and is pushing us to move forward with it. They're the experts. I see the names on the committee. I know many of them. I really don't want to spend too much time getting in the weeds on their specific policies. I do have one thing that I think ought to be addressed. But my general take is that I'm going to go read the letter, but that if the committee did this work, that we ought to probably take these policies and run with them and not try to finesse them unnecessarily. But that's my take.
I just want to say tremendous amount of work that went into this, and I was really happy to see the partners that you had contributing to this effort as well. I mean, that was just mind-boggling to go, oh, 384 pages. Okay. I don't know. We can't undo the mistakes of the past. So I know with our transportation network, we're still approving subdivisions out beyond where STA serves. And you can put all the green pathways in that you want, but if people still have to get to their jobs, unless we say, oh, mandatory, you got to work from home, but grocery workers can't, hospital workers can't. I mean, we're going to have to face that. And how do we solve those problems? But I do believe in the power of the community brain trust. So it's not an unsolvable problem. It's just how we get there that's going to be the big question. I applaud the policies, the goals and policies, but unless it's backed up with shall and must instead of may or should be encouraged, we're not going to get there. That's my big, and it always has been my big complaint in the policy world, which means that the regulations will have to carry out those policies. So, and that's going to be painful for a lot of people. I mean, they're used to doing things a certain way. So I think that this is the right track, definitely. And it's really, I left off reading this. I had to read it in a couple of settings because I was depressed. I was really depressed to see the low to medium grades. I mean, it was like, oh my God, that's like me going home with a report card that says, not working up to her potential. It's like, oh my God. So I think, like I said, we were working with one set of situations for the last, I don't know how many, 50 years at least. And now we are facing our decisions and the consequences of them. And we won't be around in 50 years, but we got to do it. So I think these are great. I really appreciate this. I don't know how we can put the hammer down on subdivisions that are already in progress out in the hinterlands. But I think we should. I think there should be sunset requirements personally, so that we can get to some of these transportation requirements that we need to meet for GHG. So those are my thoughts. Sorry, didn't mean to ramble on.
Thank you
this is
both.
time
It's
for rambling.
important to hear your perspectives.
I just want to clarify my thoughts were just about the policies. I do have some thoughts about implementation.
For it.
I would,
I don't think we're there yet, so I'll save those.
great, we do want to hear
my-
them, so I'm glad you have them. And it connects to your colleagues' comments of you can have great policies, but you also need an implementation plan. And I will say the climate element, as described under law and as part of your comp plan, sets a 20-year horizon and is not an implementation plan. It's more of a strategic direction setting place. We did identify a couple next implementation steps that need to be synced up with the rest of the comp plan. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts on those. Other members?
I'll do my best to stay on point with all this stuff and not go too far off on a few things. But I'm all about the infrastructure for the electrical vehicles and things like that. But you bring up federal or state. I mean, federal government just axed a lot of stuff on electric vehicles with the big auto agencies here in the United States, Ford, Dodge, GM. I don't know if any of you guys saw any of that stuff, but it all boils down to money in everybody's pockets. And I don't know how often you guys go across from state lines or whatnot, but gasoline in Montana is $1.98 a gallon. Here, we're one of the most taxed states in the nation. Oil companies aren't going anywhere, and they do dictate a lot of things. But I see a lot of this stuff, and I see a lot of different policies coming in here, and I just see so many more things that are just going to hit everybody's pockets on a lot of this stuff when it comes to building a house, buying a car, loading our electrical grid. We already sell a ton of power. It's not just a Vista. You got PSE Energy, you got Bonneville. We're selling so much power to different states. You know, there's talking about an audit here on our county. Oh, where's a lot of this other money going? How can it benefit our county to come back? I mean, I'm all about different ideas. I understand that there's been a lot of work and a lot of people that have put a lot of time into all of this. And it boils down again to a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer money that has gone into this, and so I'm all about clean energy and building the best houses I can possibly build for our community. But there's got to be more feasible ways to get there. And I'm open to different ideas and learning. I try to learn every day with a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of things in here that I think are awesome, but on the reality of things, how do we get back? I understand building these communities closer to people's jobs and everything like that. And, looking at some other things, like the new Amazon centers here in town, they're great. Amazon just cut 40,000 jobs in the last couple of weeks. That does affect the plants out here. I mean, so there's so many other things that can boil into this, and I'll stop rambling from here because I can go in different directions.
Are there any specific requests or edits you would have?
I want to read more. I need more of this stuff in front of me. I did see it on the last page, and there's a lot of stuff to go through, but I appreciate your time, Doctor.
I'll just point out the plan itself is really only 40 pages. It's not that hard to read it. I'm going to be frank. The other 200 something pages are addendum. The plan is 40 pages. We all should read it.
Meg, I think we can move on.
Great, thanks, Al. And each round, I'm going to present the goal and highlight a little bit about the policies. And then again, when we go around, those probably start to feel redundant. And I think if you can we're looking for input to shape the goal and policy, specifically in the climate element. And as a reminder, I hear some of the comments on we need implementation support. What will this look like? And what we're looking for today is that the policies provide the direction to provide the next step for implementation. So would love specific feedback. Goal 2 is about promoting local renewable and low carbon energy production and utilization. So 2.1 is about facilitating the diversification of the electricity supply. And that's in Spokane County by adjusting zoning codes to allow more wind and solar and updating land use regulations to allow more community solar and individual as well as large scale, but while minimizing impact to priority habitat species and conservation areas. 2.2 is about supporting and promoting energy efficiency programs for a wide range of customers. And 2.3 is about increasing incentives and policies to enhance the affordability and adoption of residential solar. So we've got kind of a land use one, programming around energy efficiency one, and then an incentivizing renewable energy one. Any reactions from the members?
These all seem reasonable to me.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they do. And I would love to have solar panels on my roof. And I have a south facing, takes a lot of heat during the day. So I do passive solar heating. But even with the Avista rebate, I, as a senior citizen on a fixed income, couldn't afford it. So I think we need more support especially if this was to become a mandatory thing, to be able for and I do agree that individual residential should be more prevalent than it is. He's putting vast arrays of solar panel fields or wind power fields out in our agricultural areas. We've really had to go around and think about that, and we're still discussing it. And I still come back, and I mean, I guess we're gonna have, I mean, I know we're gonna have to do it, and I don't mind it. I just wish we could figure out a way to do it so that it doesn't affect agricultural land or the wildlife or any of that. The other thing I really have a problem with are data centers that are chewing up all the energy that we do produce and increasing residential prices for individuals. I just, it doesn't make sense. And they're also chewing up a lot of water. So I mean, I don't know. Like I said, these are big problems. I trust the community brain trust. So it's good that we identify the problem. That's part of the good planning process. Identify the problem and generate alternatives. So we're there. Now we just need to figure out some solutions. So this is a start. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work that's going into it. Thank you for walking us through this, Doctor.
I'll just respond to, if you have language, I hear you on wanting more programs and that the existing programs aren't sufficient. The reason we don't have stronger language in here, we have support and promote programs, in part because we want to be sensitive to putting something in the plan that the county can actually implement. And if we had, you know, sort of aggressively fund programs to enhance solar on individual, that would get more at what you're saying. And how will the county leverage the ability to do that is a reason we don't have it on there more specifically. And your other comment around data centers and their use, we do have a policy in the, I believe it's the land use goal that suggests really regulating or thinking deeply about, we didn't name data centers specifically in part because it's a moving landscape and who knows in 3 or 4 more years what other future need there might be, but we did say about, and I can highlight that policy when we get to it. We do have one about ensuring that large scale users like that offset their use and minimize environmental restriction or environmental impacts. And I'm happy to take your input on that policy. I'll flag it when it comes up, because I do think it's a really important one for you to contend with.
I would
Other
just say, I think
members?
maybe other than like more aggressive language, to like maybe talk about affordability in some way could get to Melissa's point to have, you know, it talks about promoting programs, but and of course the language is gone now, but I can pull it up here. It's back up. Thank you. Support and promote energy efficiency programs, but like maybe, you know, some kind of language could get to affordability here. But yeah, I mean, I understand the hesitancy to use more aggressive adverbs at the beginning of the policy.
And Mr. Chairman, I would tag on to that a little bit. As we talked before, when the climate and resiliency element goals, policies get integrated into the rest of the plan, we'll have a chance to talk about essentially what was mentioned before, a cost benefit analysis. If there's a cost to this, is there a concomitant benefit that that provides a reason to do it rather than simply a government mandate to do it? And so we'll take a look at that as we create our own implementation program for the comp plan itself. So good comments, definitely keep track of those, and you will see them coming up, even though they might not necessarily be in any specific element. Please go ahead, Meg.
Yep. So we'll just keep moving through, and I think Scott will let me know maybe when we need to take a break, but we'll keep moving through and just try to hear your input. Goal 3 is really more on enhancing building energy efficiency and reducing emissions through those sorts of efforts. So we've got 3.1, incentivize building owners, homeowners, and businesses who can install carbon capture devices. 3.2, promoting weatherization and energy and water efficiency upgrades by offering technical assistance, facilitating access to rebates and incentives where available. Somebody commented that there is of course, unfortunately, there may be changes in federal and state policy in years ahead that reduce, and there may be some that enhance programs. So kind of keeping the county nimble around that. And 3.3 is requiring new county buildings and retrofit projects. So this is focused on the county specific to include greenhouse gas emission reducing equipment and energy and water efficiency measures like heat pumps, insulation, energy efficient appliances. So I will pause and get feedback.
I'm a big fan of all the policies that hold the county accountable to do the thing. So it's not rules for thee, but not for me. So I like this policy a lot, 3.3, but also policies about fleet conversion and any of the policies that hold the county itself accountable to leading by example, I find to be particularly compelling, and this is one of them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will assume if there's no comment that folks just like the set. And I appreciate any robust input. This is your time to really offer that. So thank you. Goal 4 is about land use. And so promoting land uses that maintain both urban and rural character while increasing housing supply. So there's been some conversation among you all about, well, we have an existing land use pattern and what does that look like? So I look forward to hearing your thoughts on these policies here. 4.1 is about collaborating with the Transit Authority and SRTC to integrate multimodal transportation and new development and redevelopment. 4.2 is about maintaining a stable growth area to reduce development pressure and consider infill strategies like missing middle, form-based codes, and other to build out of the urban growth area, developing appropriate density and community character. And then 4.3 is about adjusting land use designations in general to encourage higher density developments along transit stops, expand development types, align with critical area ordinances, and ensure no net loss of critical habitat, which can play a role in sequestering carbon. So around these, we've got coordinating with transit to encourage multimodal. We've got maintaining a growth area and really focusing on infill development. And then 4.3 is a little bit more about operationalizing that, so adjusting land use designations. Looking forward to your feedback.
I have more of a question for Scott, or maybe the planners in your group. I'm not sure if I've seen I'm not sure if I've seen a mapping of what we have lost in the way of ecological function, whether it's wetlands or open space or any of those things, like over a time horizon.
That's a very good point. I do not know of that level of analysis or mapping. It would be an interesting exercise. We can probably start that at least in sort of the geographic remote sensing world by comparing aerial photography from 2001 to 2021. You know, what can we see in that 20-year period? And you know, put that in front of Clyde as a landscape architect to help interpret what those green covers mean and what that loss means. That would be something that would be very interesting. We'll take a look at that.
Well, I know that we're going to see.
And maybe we can talk Clyde into helping.
I know we're going to see more commenting on the tree canopy that we've lost and the forested areas. So that would be interesting. And also, this is really, I just need to give you more work. A future projection based on what we already have in the pipeline for development in the next 5 years or so. Because I know that's, I mean, where things are permitted as far as, even if it's just a approved plat as far as, and not a development permit, somebody's already gone that far. And we don't have, I don't think we have sunset provisions anymore. That kind of went away. So it would just be, and maybe that's just a really academic exercise, but it would be good to know what we've lost and what we could further lose based on what they're telling us. That was one of the things that I really appreciated was their projections into the 22nd century. But that's, I mean, that was really what was like, oh my God, this is depressing. So we do have to do something, but those would be helpful to me.
Yeah, in terms of the climate vulnerability assessment, we didn't look at past historical conversion or development, but we did look at risks to existing natural areas from drought, for example, and wildfire. So we don't, as part of the climate vulnerability assessment, we didn't do what you're saying. That said, Scott, I wonder if Tammy's team at Facet has completed some of that mapping.
We're going to find out.
So on these about multimodal, I not hearing from folks, just should I take that as support?
Yeah, I support these ones.
Yes, I do too.
Goal 5, and we're getting through some of these greenhouse gas emissions reduction one. This is also a land use one, but it's more focused on working lands and natural lands rather than urban and rural ones. And it's about employing land use that help them be sequesterers of carbon, meaning where if we manage lands responsibly, the soil can then uptake some of the carbon in the atmosphere. So see, policy 5.1 is about encouraging. And again, this is a bit of a soft verb here, but that's because Spokane County doesn't currently interface directly necessarily frequently around practices. But increasing that in the future. So encouraging land managers, farmers, and property owners to lower their greenhouse gas emissions, enhance carbon sequestration, and increase climate resilience through, for example, promoting supplies not derived from fossil fuels, sustainable water storage and farming practices, and balancing ecosystems needs. 5.2 is to, if feasible, establish a transfer of development rights program to conserve rural and sensitive lands and focus growth in urban areas. And 5.3 is to maintain, restore, and manage natural lands like forests, wetlands, prairie, and shrub steppe, particularly outside of growth areas, and including areas for long-term agricultural use and other working land use. I will pause.
Meg, I wonder if you or maybe Graham, but can you summarize what our partner communities input or how they might react to this one, as it does really affect them perhaps more directly than the metro core of the council? What did our small towns have to say about goal 5?
If I could chime in on that one too, I glowed the committee up earlier and said that I thought that they were solid, but I did notice that I didn't notice an obvious ag representative on the committee. Maybe I'm missing somebody, but I would be a little bit interested in that. Did we try to get an ag representative? Is there somebody that I'm not noticing?
I'll speak to the first question, and then Graham, maybe you can chime in on the ag member on the committee. As we've gone to the 8 towns, Scott, we are focusing in those towns more on their own climate element, not necessarily reviewing the broader county one. There is a lot of overlap among the two where we have kind of more specific ones. So in the towns, particularly the Palouse towns that are surrounded by farmland, we do have policies around preserving and maintaining that farmland. And in general, I'd say many of the towns have been pretty supportive of the policies that have come before them, with maybe one exception in Deer Park with wanting a little like a smaller list of policies and goals. But around these sorts of questions, these sorts of policies, we haven't heard any contestation, I should say. Graham, do you want to chime in about an ag member on the committee? We did have representatives from more organizations working on conserving natural areas.
Yeah, I would say that there was a large contingent that was there that supported natural areas in general, but not ag lands in particular. So that we had a lot of people from we had Sierra Club was there, Trails Coalition. There were a lot of people that had a big concern with preserving tree canopy in the unincorporated county. So there's definitely there's a general concern in preserving those lands for their whether it be for architecture or excuse me, for agriculture or for resource conservation.
And kind of a follow-up on that, the technical advisory teams were organized around the specifics of each chapter or each element. So there's also the resource lands chapter that delves more specifically into agriculture, forestry, and that, as well as the rural and natural lands chapter. So there's some overlapping parts of that, but they were also set up as more specific things. So it's a really good point. One of the things that we'll be doing with all of these is now that these drafts of the individual chapters are done, we will broaden the dissemination of these to our other communities to say, even though you may not have been part of this up front, here's something to react to. Tell us what you think of it. Tell us if you think there's something missing, much like we're asking you. So this is a good reminder that we will renew that with our partner communities specifically to help address the county side as well as their own environs.
I'll just note the committee did include somebody from Resolute Forest Products, which I think is like a timber company. So that's sort of ag adjacent, I think you could say. Yes.
Kind of resourcey, but good point, Logan. And I appreciate that comment from my colleague. I mean, Green Bluff has been certainly affected by climate change issues, or could have just been bad years, but they've had several crop failures in the last 10 years. In various, like the soft fruits or the hard fruits, stone fruits. And then we do have maybe not as much in Spokane County wheat farmers as we used to, but we do have grass and hay farmers. So that would be great to reach out to them specifically. They probably have an organization for all that, but and then the transfer of development rights, I know that has been kicked around, and I think the city of Spokane even had an ordinance for transfer of development rights on the books. I don't think it's there anymore. It just didn't, the market conditions were like, so what? They didn't do it. But I think the conservation easements that the county offers have worked really well for people. On the other hand, that affects the tax base. So I don't know what.
And just kind of quickly, the county ordinance does have a TDR provision, but it's based essentially on an allowance of moving development rights from lands that are otherwise affected by critical areas. It's not really a density transfer. It's more of here's a piece of land that may have been in the urban growth area for some period of time before current rules, and it's 40% wetland, so 40% is undevelopable. Can you capture that development right in a different way? It's not been used in the time I've been at the county, so I don't know if in fact we'll go back and take a look. We'll see if it's ever been used, but that's the extent that we have in our current code. You're right, though, the market doesn't really work here for the kind of TDR that would work in King County or in Seattle, where you want to capture a development right from something and add it on to another 10 floors of a high rise over here to compensate for keeping a park in the middle of the city, for example, or something like that. I'm not sure we have the market pressure to warrant it.
I'd like to interject a point here. I've spent quite a bit of time in the last couple of weeks studying law of unintended consequences. And it's really come home to me. My Beacon Hill project, we were on the threshold about a year ago of not getting natural gas at our project. California ran out of water. Everything we're reading about is that we're not going to have enough electricity to supply things. And I'm just very concerned that we not look back at this stuff. I'm not against any of these policies, but one of the stories I read was Mexico City passed a law that said you can only drive to work 4 days a week. We're trying to protect the environment. So what do people do? Citizens do? They bought another car because the mileage was, the transportation was based per vehicle. we're already at a point where 80% of our population can't afford a median priced home. So, I mean, we need to pay attention to the environment, but we also got to realize people are going to react to it. And we need to be able to upcheck this quick enough. We can't have projects that don't have gas. I just don't believe we can do that. It's a great goal, but everything that I'm reading says we're going to run out of electricity, clean energy, or we're going to produce it with gas. So I'm just concerned that all of these things have shells and not shoulds. I mean, I totally disagree with my colleague over here, but we've got a population that from when I got out of college and got married, the average couple was having kids in their 20s. Now they're in their 30s, and instead of having 2 or 3, they're having 1 or 2 or none. I mean, we may be solving our own problem because we're creating a mess to live in. And I'm concerned about the consequences of all these regulations that we adopt. And then we never seem to go back. And I really appreciate, Scott, your comment recently about 27 is going to be a year of looking at what we maybe need to fix. And I think that's critical, that we not just look at these laws that are grandiose and they sound great, but when you put them out in public and the citizens react to it, they're going to react in their own interests. And I'm just concerned that we get too carried away with shells and wills instead of shoulds and oughtas, and particularly I'm not seeing a review process. As planners, we plan, we don't review and correct. Problem solvers solve problems. We need both.
I appreciate a lot of the concerns you raised about, for example, declining water, rising energy costs, rising just concerns for everyone, and your concern about, a lot of policies and what that means for folks. And I'm just curious if you have like a specific change you'd like in this set of goals or just more generally in the climate element. I'm just trying to understand the specific action you're hoping for.
Thank you very, very much for your time. This is Clyde Haase. Reality is something that we can also always look at and back to and bring everybody to said, guess what? At the time when we did this, here's what was happening. I really appreciate your hard work. I want to tell you something that I shared 20 years ago. I worked on the GMA and we covered all of these things so far. I have not heard anything new that we didn't talk about 20 years ago. But what we are doing today, 20 years later, is that we're reviewing the same ones because they haven't really changed. And we have to have flexibility in our thought of thinking. Pete, I loved your comments because we're kind of on our, I think the last word I put down here was realism. We are real about what we're living through today. We know what we need to be looking at in the future. I appreciate, we shall do this, we shall do, you know what? We need flexibility because tomorrow the weather may not be the same as it is today. We have to have flexibility. And we, the planning commissioners, and 20 years ago, I think thinking back, we did a pretty good job because we allowed to happen what's happening today. Scott, you've done a fantastic job because you're keeping us charged to the issue at hand because tomorrow it may change. But we cannot sit here and say, we shall not have a development out there. We shall not have it there. But we have to look at the conditions that's going to surround it. Land planning is very important. And this commission has got so much knowledge and so much, and I love the diversity of opinions because that's what makes it work. That's what's going to make this policy and your policy, Doctor, that you're talking about happen because 20 years ago, you were there. I am saying with your ideas because we're living them again today. We need to stay positive. We need to be open-minded. And we need to understand we're not going to solve all the problems today. We're only going to continue to keep them in mind of how we're going to deal with it the next 20 years because I ain't going to be here.
I just want to point out the word shall is not in any of these policies. So I'm not sure why we're hooked up on that. But not a single one of these policies include the word shall. In fact, the adverbs in this three policies are incredibly weak. Encourage, evaluate, maintain, restore, and manage. There's literally nothing about shall. So I'm confused why we're hooked up on shall when the word shall is not in a single one of these policies.
If I could jump in for a second.
Okay, beat me to it. Okay.
It's certainly a good point. These are out for your initial evaluation, and you heard Dr. Horst also talk about they use softer language because they didn't feel through the community outreach and through the best available science to the other trees, there was support for a more mandatory environment. That said, your comments are being noted. We will be taking the wide range of that into account and presenting that in front of the Board of County Commissioners that has the authority to say, we want, this is really important, this needs to be mandatory, or this is important, but it should have some flexibility. So there's a time somewhere in the future on the level of veracity that each of these will be assigned.
I just want to be clear. I'm happy with the adverbs. I just hear debate of like, there's too many shalls, there's not enough shalls. I just want to be clear. There are 0 shalls in the policies currently.
That's true. I appreciate that, Logan. And I, my frustration just stems from 25 years of writing policy documents that really didn't say much. And you're absolutely correct, Pete. People will act in their own best interest. And I think that we are seeing the results of that flexibility to approve whatever, even though it didn't say that you had to do it. We're not going to make you do it. So that's what's going to happen. And that's what has happened. So I just think that we also need to think about that as a unintended consequence of, I hesitate to say, a laissez-faire attitude towards what the next 20 years might hold for this county, which in the big scheme of things is not that big. It's big, but it's not that big. What can we do to do a better job? And that's where we have to go. That's all I'm saying. Maybe the policies are not the right place for shall, but the regulations certainly are. And it got to be backed up by the policy because that's the foundational document.
But
Yeah, I
just a
will say
second on a
thank you.
couple of things.
Go ahead. Mhm.
We have to also be what Clyde said, it's flexible. Because what Melissa said here a few minutes ago on saying, she would love to have solar on her house. I build houses. Solar is very expensive. We get mandated and dictated on so many things through the state that drive the cost of affordability, which we've had some words of affordability in here. So shall, shoulds, managements, whatever. I don't care about the words. I care about the reality of the cost for our community and what it costs to build these houses, or having the flexibility of natural gas or not, or other things, or electric cars. We need to be real on it, on everything, and it should be a choice on what people should be able to want to go get and have, and not mandated rules and laws on the policies on things like that. So when it comes to building these houses, for example, electric furnaces and heat pumps, they fail between 15 and 20 degrees outside. Has it been 20 degrees here in Spokane, 15 degrees this winter? Yes, there has been some days. All of a sudden, there's a spike in their electric bill because the electric furnace turns on, because we're not allowed to have natural gas furnaces in these houses on these building codes anymore. When natural gas is one of the most affordable clean burning energies that's affordable to put into our homes. So there's so many different directions that a lot of these conversations can go to, where we need to be real and also be flexible, but also learn about a lot of this new stuff as well.
Yeah, I'll just try to synthesize what I heard. I heard kind of a couple different points, and I don't know everyone's name, so apologies. But I did hear one point that a reminder that the climate element sets long-term 20-year strategic direction as policy. So the verb choice is sometimes maintain, evaluate, not shall, in part to set trajectory. And I heard interest in, well, that's nice, but without actual implementation actions, this won't happen. And I will say that the climate element does not provide specific implementation. It's just not the level it plans at. So a good next step would be to flesh out an implementation plan, a real specific, like, okay, if we're going to do this thing in CE 5.1 to encourage land managers, what would that look like? Is there a program? Is there a staff? Is there a regulation? Is there incentives? The same could be put towards the point on natural gas versus electric heat pumps. We have an encourage electric heat pump as a policy because it does have less greenhouse gas emissions. Natural gas actually is quite a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and it is not considered a clean fuel under greenhouse gas emissions, for example. But we only have encourage because you raise really good points about affordability and feasibility. Hence the kind of the flexible approach. So I also heard a call for more flexible approach. I do think these policies, as how they're worded, do offer a fairly flexible approach, and it will be when it comes to developing the actual implementation, where the struggle about some of the specifics. I think our current approach is to offer this real high level strategic direction, and I'm curious what your reactions are to that. And again, with the hope of getting specific ideas for changing language in this policy to match your hopes.
Since I became part of the commission here, my thing from day one has been affordability. And on all levels, one of my key terms is creating villages. And there's two words that are number one and have been since day one for me, and that's feasibility and affordability. And I think in all this is great. And I look at it, I go, I want to see where this fits for moving forward in the next 20, 30 years in the issue of affordability and also the issue of feasibility, because young people cannot afford homes. Us that are getting old are downsizing. And when we were younger building families, everybody had to have an upstairs with 4 bedrooms, and those are leaving now. We're trying to find, rancher style homes that are 2, 3 bedrooms to downsize to, and they're not available. So feasibility and affordability, I think, have got to be keys if we're going to get buy-in all the way around. And so that's my soapbox for the years I've been here, those 2 words. Thank you.
Speak to that a little bit. In some of our other elements of the comprehensive plan, we'll speak more directly to feasibility, affordability of housing, particularly in the housing element.
Yeah, and on these, goal 5 isn't speaking to that, but we had the goal that did address building efficiency and encouraging on-site renewable energy, for example, with the hope that energy efficiency measures reduce energy costs for participants in them. There are, of course, some upfront costs if there are not programs to offset that. But certainly, I think that a good climate element both advances reduction in carbon pollution and also has other benefits like helping people have lower bills, helping people have access to other kinds of transportation that's healthier for them, things like that. So perhaps we can make that clearer in this climate element that the goal is not simply to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but to foster benefits to community members around affordability and quality of life.
Any more comments?
Let's go to goal 6, and then maybe Graham or Scott, I'll take can you go back to goal 6?
Clyde has one more comment.
Oh, yes, let's hear it.
I want to first say thank you for doing what you're doing, and I appreciate you've just renewed what happened 20 years ago. But I'm looking for, you're pointing out the issues we talked about then. I want to hear some suggestions of a particular problem and how it would be best handled 20 years later here today from when it was originally done. That's what I'm looking for, is some leadership of really some realistic approaches. And that's what I'm here for today. And that's what I'm looking for. Pipe dreaming, we can't pipe dream as much as we used to because it's real today.
Yeah, thanks, Clyde. Just going back, yeah, I appreciate that there's been really strategic direction by the Plan Commission and counselors on growth for Spokane County for 20 years. When we conducted our policy audit, we did find some existing policies on the books that were explicit around climate, reducing carbon pollution and advancing climate resiliency, but also not a lot of policies in certain areas. For example, there were not a lot of policies around promoting energy efficiency. There were not really ones trying to be strategic to promote compact development. There weren't ones around promoting renewable energy. So I do think there's some new direction in here from the past 20 years that are really targeted around reducing pollution from carbon and enhancing resilience. We haven't gotten to the resilience ones yet, but there are some new ones. There are some that were already on the books that were foundational, and there are some new ones. So a lot of these are new policies actually for the county to consider.
And if I could, remember that as we are talking goals and policies here, as has been noted, or at least alluded to, the implementation of that is through our development regulations. And that's where, they carry the force of law. That's where the shalls take place and the musts take place. And it is in the writing of that code that will be addressing the implementation of the policy. Quick example, and not to take too much time, but we've talked many times about the new approaches to zoning, neighborhood residential, neighborhood commercial, to provide flexibility for the architecture, for the mass, the density within a given zone by right. And that also has the idea of what are the amenities that are required to get that flexibility. It could be that if you're taking a piece of land that is 40% tree covered, when you're done, you must have, 30% of the subdivision must have tree covers. It may be something that has those implementation trade-offs in them. But there will be a chance to discuss, how does this hit the ground? What does this really mean when it hits the ground? And so we will get there.
Yeah, and I'll take us through goal 6, and then Scott, maybe we'll take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, let's go through this one, and then before we get into that next section, if it's all right with the chairman, we can take a break.
So goal 6 is really about reducing waste and encouraging composting and recycling. 6.1 is about helping businesses and institutions reduce by providing resources that help them reduce. So this is really about supporting businesses that help them adopt sustainable practices. 6.2 is supporting the comprehensive solid waste management plan by promoting the waste reduction hierarchy and increasing facility capacity for recycling and composting. 6.3 is about promoting local industrial development that's got circular economy principles embedded. And 6.4 is potentially one that we would move in. This is one addressing the concerns of data centers that were mentioned earlier. It is written more broadly than about data centers, and it's here in this waste-related goal. It could possibly be moved. The policies in here are a little bit broader than waste, but they do focus on that. But this one says prioritizing developments, businesses, and industries with low energy and resource demands, and requiring new industrial uses to minimize emissions, water stress, and energy use, and maximize community benefits by requiring them to generate and use renewable energies. So that just want to flag that one is intending to get at some of the data center concerns. So curious what your reactions to these are.
Would you like to take a break and think about this? Without objection, let's take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, but I think we're taking a 5-minute break. Is that correct?
And anytime you're ready.
Did we want to hear comments on this waste and economic development related set of
Yes.
policies?
We're back in session. Thank you, everyone. Scott, go ahead.
Commissioners, we're looking for comments on goal 6 and the policies mentioned in there, and then we will move on to the second part of our morning.
This was the only one that I had a super specific comment on, and maybe it's just too specific, but also it feels like it's a very unique issue for Spokane. Spokane is a waste to energy facility. I know it's managed and run by the city, but I believe much of the county's waste goes to the waste to energy facility. It has a very uncertain regulatory future. Maybe it's not a big enough impact to the overall county climate that it deserves mention here. I know it is mentioned in some of the addendum, but no really policies around it or goals around it. I guess my recommendation would be, personally, I think that we should support a reasonable future for the waste energy facility. I don't know exactly what that means. You can tell I haven't workshopped this language very good. But I feel like waste energy it's only one on the West Coast. And I feel like it ought to be mentioned in some way to offer some guidance. It's something that we are going to fight about over the next 25 years. And having some guidance on how to proceed in that fight would be helpful.
Yeah, great
Yeah,
input. And I should be clear, folks, that I'm tracking all your comments and I'll provide Scott and Graham staff with a redlined version of the element where I try to integrate reactions to your comments. And I'm flagging that we'll add a policy around something around that. Workshop your language.
Love that. Thank you for that.
Yes, I second Logan's comment. I think that that's really important because the waste to energy plant is contemplated to get hit with greenhouse gas fines. I don't see that landfills are being hit as hard, and I really don't like landfills. So I think that, yeah, some guidance there would be great. I think some balancing out of the fact that we're not burying trash is pretty important, or sticking it on a barge and letting it run around the ocean is really important. I'm not sure what the solution is, but I think some language there would be really important. I do appreciate the whole goal as a whole, but trying to figure out how to reduce general household waste, whether it's food or just garbage or whatever, so that we're doing less or trying to produce less. I guess human beings are just pretty trashy, but those are all really important. I think it would be good to have something about why this is important. As a planner, I always got a lot of questions about why should I care? Why is this important? Well, that's kind of what the objective statement should say. And I know it's encapsulated in these policy statements, but just to be real, there's not very many people that are going to read this whole document, but the planners and the people that are going to try to implement are going to read it and have to figure out, why am I doing this? And what does the code need to say to implement this? Or what program do we need to implement this? So I think those kinds of statements up front are important, even if it's just the 1 minute elevator objective. So that's just my 2 cents on that. And I really do like 6.4. I mean, you can kind of read it a lot of different ways, but it does speak to what we're talking about with trying to make sure that anybody who's a big user of resources gives back in a meaningful way.
Just a quick comment. Melissa mentioned not many people will ultimately read our comprehensive plan. We unfortunately agree with that. It's not going to be a bestseller on the New York Times list. But what it does, in sort of a hidden way, is it's a statement of public policy. It's a statement of public will by Spokane County's electeds based on what you recommend and what they hear from the public and what they hear from professional planners. So that in a legislative hearing or in a federal congressional hearing, and somebody says, well, what's this waste to energy plan all about? Why do you have this thing? You can point to something in your comprehensive plan and say, this is a statement of public policy that this is desirable and it's important for us to have this thing, whether it's waste to energy or more traditionally going for highway and transportation grants. You can't go for to SRTC and have them sponsor a federal grant if you don't have that arterial in your comprehensive plan that says it's here for a reason. It's here to serve these things. So it's a critical foundation for other decisions that get made for implementation, even if it's not a popular fiction or nonfiction book. So there's, I mean, you all know this, but oftentimes our audience sometimes wonders, like, why are you doing this? Well, it has reasons beyond just describing how we want to grow. It's a foundation for funding and for action that you can point to and say, this is valuable to our public, and that's why we're asking you to do this thing. So anyway, Meg, let's move on.
Yes, let's go to goal 7. Oh, sorry, let me pause here. So we're moving into the resilience sub-element, and as a reminder, the first one is about reducing carbon pollution and tracking to the state's goal of 95% below 1990 levels by 2050 of greenhouse gas emissions, following that kind of wedge tool I showed you. And this sub-element is about recognizing the reality that the county is already experiencing impacts like wildfire, extreme heat, flooding, storms, and et cetera, and developing ways to be more resilient to those impacts and to the anticipated intensification of those impacts. Some background that we completed in the climate vulnerability assessment is we examined the likely future impacts to Spokane County, and there you are expected to experience increased summer heat, increased summer drought, increased winter precipitation events, less snow, increased wildfire risk. So the whole point of these goals is to enhance your resilience to those impacts, help people stay safe during them and recover after them. So we have 5 goals in this area, and I'll work through them one by one, just like we just have. And I want to pause and say, I appreciate all the input so far. Your input, this is a work in progress, this climate element, and I am taking your input and we will revise the climate element to strengthen it as we hear from you all. And I'll be in touch with Scott and Graham to make sure we relay the changes back to you. So keep providing input. And go on to the next goal, Scott. Goal 7 is to strengthen Spokane County's built critical infrastructure through climate-ready design, construction, and maintenance that improves safety, reliability, and resilience. So we have 6 policies here. With the first one, and again, these are the beginning sentences of the policies. You hopefully have the longer one in front of you where they get a little bit more into the details. But 7.1 is about updating building and development standards. 7.2 is expanding energy resilience to include backup renewable energy, microgrids, and strategic power line undergrounding to reduce wildfire risk. 7.3 is about integrating green infrastructure into development to manage stormwater and reduce urban heat, for example. 7.4 is about integrating wildlife and transportation safety considerations into transportation infrastructure planning. 7.5 is about managing water resources sustainably, particularly promoting smart irrigation, stormwater management, and et cetera. And 7.6 is expanding the resilience of Spokane County's transportation system by integrating climate hazards into their design. So these are all about built infrastructure, climate resilience. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments.
I just have a question about 7.3. This is just some information I've gathered. In dealing with the Vista, there's reasons they don't want power underground. I can't tell you what they were, but I'm just saying, is this something we've talked to them about? That's just a question.
Let me address that first in a context that's different from the planning context. The planning team has consulted with Avista at various levels, so we do that continuously because they're an important constituent for our growth. That said, over the last year, or in mostly over 2025, Avista has pulled a handful of permits that we've processed through our shoreline master program in critical areas because they are doing a fairly massive undergrounding of rural lines. They are addressing the fire hazard part of this without being told to. And so they have several major projects in the county where they are putting overhead lines that are running through vegetated areas. They're putting them underground. So it's something they're actively doing. And we know it because they come through our permit shop. And on the broader context, we work with Avista on many fronts. Part of it is also in the urban growth area because they're interested in where that growth may take place. And we look at that as one of the infrastructure elements in the capital facilities is there adequate electric and gas distribution coming from Avista in this area, or is it an area that's hard for them to serve? It's hard for them to serve, all of the things being equal. We go somewhere that's easier and more cost effective to serve. So we do talk to them pretty extensively, but I wanted you to know about that undergrounding because I think it's a pretty cool thing.
Other comments?
I'm looking at the 7.5 and I'm not sure, but maybe Scott can help me out here. At least I know on the West Plains, trying to figure out if we actually have water, affordable water to serve the proposed growth and development is or has been difficult, and it will continue to be difficult. It's expensive. And the Spokane River did kind of run dry out by the Sullivan Bridge this summer. So I know, we're staring it down and people think the aquifer is infinite. It's not. It is not. And it does face a lot of stresses from infiltration from different uses, whether it's fertilizers or stormwater runoff or a multitude of issues. So I think that is going to be really important. I know the city of Spokane has a water usage requirement or not usage requirement in the summertime, but I think that needs to be a standard that our entire county needs to follow. We're on the dry side of the mountains. It's a fact. Always has been a fact, but people don't see it that way. And people complain about having brown grass, and I'm going, I want to dig it all up and put in a few beds, and I think that's really important that gets really emphasized.
Previewing what you will see in the land use chapter, we are looking at incorporating some of these thoughts, but also wastewater, in saying, I hate to, maybe Logan will not like the encourage this approach, but the idea of setting a new tone for what was called xeriscaping not too far back. People who still want a single family home in a yard should be able to get what they want. That's what they're paying for. We want them to come here and have a high quality of life. Does that mean they need a front yard and a backyard? No, they may need a backyard where they've got a fence and the kids and the dogs can play, and the front yard could be a rock garden. It could be something else. Small elements like that can help in the more direct climate sense. It could be planted with mature trees instead of grass, but it also makes really a significant difference in water use, and importantly, when people don't think about it, in terms of wastewater use. If some of that is happening, it changes what's going into stormwater disposal, which in most cases still goes through the treatment plants. And so, all of these things have these ripple effects. It's not just do this thing. It's like, what does that mean? It means maybe you should think about when you're building a new house, plan for that to be a different kind of grass in front that doesn't need daily irrigation, and then still have the green space in the back where your kids can play. So you're going to see some new things like that as they come in the land use chapter, which is really the synthesis of all of these other pieces. And we'll be anxious to work through that with you. We'll do that in a multi-part session, more like a studio charrette, so you can we can have specific comments, we can draw on maps and do all that sort of stuff. But that you'll start to see some of that in the coming months.
To take off on what you're saying there, Scott, I've gotten a lot of advice from Greenstone, and they're solving that problem with master plan communities. You don't need a big backyard and a big front yard if you got a park 300 feet away. And so, but where do we put those? Inside the urban growth boundary, I don't know where you put one.
Well,
I don't know where there's room.
it's actually a very good example because, of course, we're right next to Kendall Yards. And, that's a lot of zero lot line development, even though it's single family owned housing. But the Olmsted Brothers Green, the park that's there, is designed as a stormwater facility. That's why it has that shallow basin in it. So it's a park 90% of the time. But when we get those rains, it serves to retard the flow of stormwater into the system by itself. So things like that are easy to do, or at least relatively easy to do. So yes, that's all of those things can play a role in going forward, and in working with home builders and others, as we try to look at this, say, what's the market? What was it you're selling that is happening out there, and is it still realistic, or can we adjust it in some way where the customers are still going to say, yeah, I like that, but it's a little bit different than the traditional quarter-acre lot with everything around it. Because the point to having the shalls that you put in here is if too much of it is mandated and we're mandating things that our market can't support, we're driving away growth. We have to find a balance, and if that balance, well, the balance is between keeping the quality of life we have, but also being able to grow at the same time. And that's that is the essence of this plan. That's different than a lot of them. Is we are very much looking forward to the implementation elements of this, writing a plan, goals, and regs that solve problems, that don't simply put up regulatory hurdles. But if there are shalls and musts, there's a reason for that we should be able to explain to somebody that says this adds value to what you're talking about, or it protects something that is truly in the public interest, even if it doesn't, if you don't particularly like it. And that's the role we play as a government.
Just one final comment. I would like to see a strong statement about any publicly owned property like parks or golf courses.
Water
Not
conservation
watering
measures.
during the middle of the day and trying to figure out how they can use native vegetation or less water consumptive, I don't know what is, bent grass, whatever it is they use on the golf courses.
What I'm hearing you say is they should turn one of the courses at Liberty Lake into a links course. That sounds like a good idea to me. I like that. I like this idea.
Well, I'll just note, I hear a strong call for a specific policy around county-owned parks and properties around water conservation and irrigation, smart irrigation and native landscaping. We'll definitely make sure we add one. Also, I'll note that we mention water here in part because it's intended to be like an overarching built infrastructure. But there is a whole goal focused on not ecosystems and water resources, where there's additional water policies. So there are more coming. Let's go to the next one, Scott. So this one's about emergency management and community health. And the main goal is to coordinate efforts to enhance Spokane's public health and emergency management agencies by being attentive to climate hazards as the county embarks on its emergency management efforts. So CE 8.1 is coordinating with local jurisdictions and others like first responders, schools, to strengthen emergency alert systems, expand neighborhood preparedness programs, and maintain communication during outages or disruptions, and to integrate formal notification procedures, particularly resources for vulnerable populations. CE 8.2 is about strengthening housing and recovery support for residents displaced by climate. CE 8.3 is about coordinating with Avista. This is another focus on energy efficiency, although the intent here is to be focused on places that help keep houses safe during, for example, extended heat and smoke events. So mentioned of air filters. And then 8.4 is implement the most recent Spokane County Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And that is, we didn't recreate the wildfire protection plan here, and it's so we're just referencing this other plan. Curious.
I'll just say I know that Avista was on the committee, and so I like that they're willing to sort of be the leader essentially, or in part coordinator of the goals or the policy that it's outlined there.
I think this is a really good policy considering that we have had several community disasters, whether it's ice storms, windstorms, wildfires. There's just been a whole host. And I think that for one thing, I've really appreciated the increased efforts at messaging to the community to, not only check and see like whether you got a alert on your smartphone or on your computer. Not everybody gets that. I mean, you could have a elderly person or somebody that's not able to receive those kinds of notifications. And so the education around it has been a push to say, check on your neighbors. If you know where that person lives or you haven't seen them, go knock on the door. I know that was really important in the first major windstorm that we had, because every city employee that could was out there knocking on doors and manning community centers and handing out snacks, and Avista was supplying little smash lights and all kinds of things just to make sure that, somebody wasn't freezing to death because the power was out for 10 days. So I think that that's really an important effort and one that should be really emphasized. But yes, I think our agencies have worked on that with all the emergencies that we have had. And I think we just need to keep moving forward because it's not going to be less.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you've been impressed by past county efforts, and this CE 8.1 is intended to kind of keep that happening and encourage and promote and expand that.
Any other comments? Okay.
So this goal is about supporting the viability of agriculture, working lands, and natural ecosystems. It's different from the earlier one under greenhouse gas emissions, which really was focused on enhancing the ability of soil to sequester carbon. This one's more on the role that these lands and the people working them, making sure that they continue to thrive in changing climate conditions and that they help contribute to an overall resilient community. So 9.1 is about encouraging collaboration between agricultural producers and others to create more local food systems and increase community food security. 9.2 is partnering with conservation districts, tribes, land trusts, and others to advance agriculture and forestry best management practices, a wide range of them, aligned with best available science around adapting to climate conditions. 9.3 is similar to one earlier about funding farmland preservation programs around conservation easements. So you saw something earlier about transfer of development rights. There's an additional policy here. 9.4 is about supporting the preservation and economic viability of open space and environmentally sensitive areas. And 9.5 is about developing tree canopy targets for urban and rural areas. So it's a policy aimed at maintaining and expanding the tree canopy. I will note that, again, these are the short versions of the policy. There are slightly longer ones in the actual written document. So looking for input.
Meg, let me interject for just a second. It may not be in or viable in the goals and policies part of our work, but yet whether it's here or maybe in goal 10, we talk a little bit about water resources, but we're being very broad, based, 9.4 preservation, economic viability of rivers, wetlands, and so on. We've got this new knowledge of contaminated water on our West Plains and the fact that it's a different aquifer system. And it seems to me that somewhere in here, we need to really identify that distinction specifically so that our successors can look at this plan and see that there are other constraints to developing west of the aquifer. And I'm not sure quite where that fits in. Maybe it's better on goal 10. But I'd like to see some very specific mention of the West Plains and why that geotechnical system is different and distinct from the rest of the main aquifer.
Yeah, noting Scott, and it may better fit in goal 10, but I'm glad you're bringing it up. And so I'm definitely noting it.
This is Clyde Haas again. Scott, I would agree with you on the west side, but I'm also going to be critical and say we need to work with Idaho because that's where our water is coming from. The east side, I'm even more because it takes 5 years to cross through our area from the state line to be disposed of. And I'm looking for some words that says that we're going to work with Kootenai County or adjacent properties. I'm with you.
I can actually give you those words. My counterpart over there, Dave Callahan, and I have met several times. And while there are not many topics that we can agree on because of the distinctions in our two state and county governments, aquifer protection, water quality is one that we both share. And he's agreed to that. As we put these together, we're going to convene a joint meeting and say, how do we talk about this in language that supports what's going on? And perhaps the selfish side is we're on the downstream side of the aquifer. What are you doing to protect us too? So yes, we have introduced that conversation a couple of years ago, and we're just about ready to put something on the table and say, here, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm noting and I think it'll better fit in goal 10 to make sure that we have a specific policy around coordinating around aquifer protection and maintenance and coordination. So look
I just
for
think
that.
some good language in the first one here, 9.1 is like a local sustainable food chain. I think that's like a simple way to summarize what comes after it. Maybe both are necessary, but I feel like that's the sort of language that anybody kind of can understand.
Thank you for that. And sorry, just to repeat, you said local sustainable food chains?
You got it.
Should we move to goal 10? So this is the more water systems and ecosystems focused goal. It does have a lot of policies, in part because there's a lot of rich interest and great participation by CPTAC on this, and it's just a foundational issue. So, and it does include ecosystems and water systems, so it is covering a wide range of resources. So we have 10.1 about preserving and protecting rivers, wetlands, riparian corridors, and others. 10.2, striving for net ecological gain through conservation designation buffers and open space corridors. 10.3 is updating the county's critical area ordinance to encourage to have more riparian buffers and no net loss of wetland. 10.4 is about implementing or collaborating and partnering with tribal governments and other organizations to implement restoration and salmon recovery actions in watersheds. 10.5 is preserving and expanding open space in parks, particularly in overburdened communities or underserved communities, and ensuring that those are climate resilient. 10.6 is about protecting the water's resources through a comprehensive drought strategy. This might be one where we add the aquifer discussion. 10.7 is supporting habitat and hydrologic restoration, establish water use priorities during drought. So there was a mention about water conservation measures. This could be a place to elaborate that. 10.8 is collaborating with purveyors and Department of Ecology to develop flexible local guidelines for a demonstration of water supply availability and sustainability. 10.9 is revising land use regulations to consider available groundwater resources. Scott, this may be a place to bring in the considerations you were just talking about in terms of the West Plains. And 10.10 is encouraging the use of water conserving programs, actions, and technology. So this is a juicy one and look forward to hearing your input.
I've got a question. We have transfer development rights in our code somewhere. Is that something we're going to consider as a tool to maybe solve some of these problems? And if so, will it come up in this process that we're going through this year? Could you just expand on that a little bit, Scott?
We do have it in the code, and oddly enough, it's the way I read it and kind of read between the lines of his history. It was designed really for this tool. It was designed to mitigate for development constraints caused by critical areas. So it exists. Like I said, I don't know if it's ever been used. It certainly hasn't been used in the last 5 years. But yes, we will take a look at that as a tool here. And again, mentioning the West Plains and the West Terraces area, if there's an area that can be managed, the stormwater can be managed, but only in with a very expensive system, should that area be planned for development, or is that a viable use? In other words, are we directing development into an area that has added costs? And that's what we're trying to look at with this urban growth area through the capital facilities. What's it going to take to build typical structures out here? But that could be a tool to compensate a landowner that purchased a piece of property that proves to be very challenging to build. This might be like a conservation's approach for that. Like, here, you can sell the development rights to this, and then this becomes a conservation parcel forever. So I think it's a perfectly viable tool to help protect critical areas, but also reflect that somebody bought that with the intention of developing it under 1970 rules, perhaps, or something like that.
So I've seen reference to the fact that we may be looking at minimizing density in agricultural lands to 40-acre parcels or increasing them. Would that be a tool that we would use to offset the loss that farmer has that could split it up into 10s or 20s? I mean, how do you see it being used?
I don't know that there's an active discussion about downzoning the rural parcels at this point. There, for the most part, rural conservation is a 20-acre minimum, rural traditional is a 10-acre minimum, and the urban reserve is designed to allow clustering so you can have future urban development while this is coming on. We need to relook at urban reserve. The rules have changed so much since 2001 that it's not serving a useful purpose. If somebody buys a piece of land in urban reserve thinking they can develop it somewhere in the next 20 years, it's been 40 years and most of that urban reserve hasn't changed. And so is that really realistic to keep it in that category? Or should some of that be in a conservation, where you can develop it at rural densities with rural qualities? That we will be looking at. Is there a transfer of rights? I don't know. That's a good question. Remember, though, that in the resource lands themselves, particularly large and small tract ag, those can't be divided any more than they are now. And they can't be de-designated from those restrictions without an extensive GMA-driven process. They're protected almost above all else. And so they already have some level of protection from urbanized development. I don't know that there would be a requirement for I don't know there'd be a reason for a transfer of development rights in an ag setting that's different than what we have now for mitigation.
I'm aware of some prime agriculture that's being divided into 20s for home sites. And I see more and more, but there's a certain segment of our population that want a 20-acre price and they don't care what it costs. And do we want that? And if we don't want it, how do we encourage that farmer not to sell it into 20s? How do we compensate him? That's just
right.
It's a law of unintended consequences again.
Right. We are looking at that in a different context right now. There's a bill it was introduced last year. It's back in the legislature this year on regulating accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in rural areas. And it's generally one of, I wouldn't say prohibiting, but making them very restrictive. The bill would, for example, force an ADU to have a separate water meter. And that's problematic because we don't meter most of our wells. It's an urban system. It's not a rural system. And so there's a legislative push to restrict development in rural lands. Whether that goes somewhere or not, we'll see what the legislature's moving. It didn't go last year. It's in committee this year. Spokane County Code currently allows both attached and detached ADUs in our rural lands. So it's not necessarily in the resource lands. The challenge that I think has been there historically in farming is if the next generation of that family wants to take on the family farm, but the current mother and father, aren't ready to move to Arizona, is there a way of creating an accessory dwelling unit that allows for a family transition so that farm stays in business and doesn't get sold to another user? We're looking at that, and a lot of other counties that have ag are looking at the same thing. But it's a challenge given the protections of GMA too.
Scott, I think we talked about what you're talking about at the last meeting, where the ADUs, for mom and dad to move into.
Sure.
With absolutely no guarantee that it's going to be mom and dad moving into it, or it's going to be a VRBO or whatever. So I think that is problematic. And I thought prime ag lands had a bit more of a level of protection than ordinary. Like Latah Valley. I mean, there's some
Right.
prime ag lands down there.
We've put in front of you both the zoning map, which recognizes the large tract, small tract ag zoning, but also the USDA soils map that identifies prime ag soils. And we can send that out to you again. Generally speaking, the entire southeast quadrant of the county is not only prime ag soils, but called soils of statewide significance. And so, yes, they have added layers of protection, even recognized in growth management. You can't divide them, you can't sell them, you can't take them out of production. If you sell it, it has to stay in agricultural production. There are other ag lands, primarily to the north, that could be prime soils if they're irrigated or if they're drained. And they don't generally, there's a group of small tract ag around Deer Park, and then of course the Green Bluff area. But in the traditional rural conservation zones, those are not protected the same way because they're not lands of statewide significance or soils of statewide significance. So there are multiple layers of distinction in the ag world.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, because I probably am. The main incentive that we have is the tax incentive, the property tax deferral, isn't it?
Oh,
I think we've got to
for
consider
ag,
that.
it's like in a holding pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get a deferral of taxes for a number of years as long as you maintain the ability to bring it back into ag production at some point in the future. And, small things like weed control.
Thank you.
Back to this goal, I think that's a useful conversation, and I want to bring us back to the ecosystems and water resources goals and policies. It's a pretty robust list. I do have on here to make sure we add one about county-owned properties like parks and buildings.
I had a few things if I could.
Yes, please do.
One, just if you're interested in the bill that Scott is mentioning that has additional limitations on ADUs outside urban growth areas, that's Senate Bill 5470. I don't think there's a House companion, but it's already in committee in the Senate. I thought that maybe 10.10 could have gray water added to it. And we already mentioned it in one of the other policies, but it seems like for consistency, it made sense there. And then 10.3 is very specific. I don't have a problem with the specificity necessarily, but I guess I'm wondering why such specificity with a specific number of feet. Is that something that's pulled from state law or something like that? It just felt unusually specific for the way that these policies have typically been crafted.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm pulling up a past. Sometimes The specifics of the policy come because we had partners on CPTAC that really generated really specific actions based on other planning efforts they were on. So that's my recollection of this one. I'm trying to pull up the older version to see if that's. And in this case, we had several folks with really detailed.
While you're looking,
Go ahead.
remind the commission that the zoning text itself has riparian buffer limits of 90, 100, and 200 feet currently existing in the zoning code. So they may have been reacting to a number that's already in use. Just standardize it. I don't know that, but
Yes, both are correct. And another tool we use that I should have mentioned earlier is that the Department of Commerce has a Climate Policy Explorer tool where they have a lot of recommended policies. And I have to go open that one right now, but some of our language also is inspired by that, the use of that tool coming from Commerce.
Cool. That's sufficient for me. Thanks.
While you're looking for that, I do have two questions.
Yes.
One, I hope that the tribes had robust participation in the water. I know that when I worked on the city's SMP, there was a lot of really strong feelings and strong input from the tribes, and that was great. It was very helpful. That kind of sounds like ecology, but I'm not sure about that. So I just wanted to make sure about that. And then I know that it's not necessarily true that the SMP and the comp plan are consistent with each other, but the more strict one will prevail. So I just want to make sure that we're lining up with Spokane County's fairly new SMP.
Good flag.
The-
Yes.
the shoreline master program was last updated in 2020, actually 2021. It was finished mid-year. But it was only recently heard by you in a joint hearing with you and Ecology a couple of months ago, and it is yet to go before the board for adoption. So it was updated a few years ago. We will be looking at that, excuse me, as these goals and as the comp plan comes together, we'll be looking to see how well they are synced up. Because it would have been updated with the comp plan available at the time, which was the 2020 version. The other critical elements, though, the critical areas ordinance is updated specifically as part of this effort. So that'll be totally in sync. And the plan, put it this way, the plan will be in sync with the critical areas ordinance.
And just to respond to so flagging 10.4, that will review it to make sure it is aligned with if we have stronger language, it's intentional, and that it's aligned with SMP and update. Also, the question on 10.5 about collaborating with tribes, there were representatives of 3 different tribes on CPTAC, and they had a lot of input into the various policies that speak to water and also to collaboration with tribes. And we're nearing the end here. This last goal is about partnering and collaborating to advance climate resilience. So that's the main focus of this goal. So it's a bit broad ranging. And 11.1 is about identifying and engaging overburdened communities in budgeting and planning to make sure that they can help shape investments. 10.2 is about establishing and maintaining government-to-government relations with local tribes and collaborating with them to integrate traditional ecological knowledge into resource planning. This language was suggested by a tribal representative. 10.3 is about partnering with tribes, but also other organizations to develop and distribute culturally contextualized outreach and education materials about climate change threats. 10.4 is partnering with the Spokane Conservation District to expand fire-wise risk assessments. And 10.5 is partnering with municipalities, water providers, and community partners to expand water conservation efforts. So a tricky thing about this goal is a lot of our goals throughout are about partnering, and we tried to pull out some of the key partner ones just to have a place to have them also identified separately and around more broader education. So that's the intent here. And look forward to hearing from you.
Something to add to that you are all aware of, in terms of formal partnering arrangements, we have the steering committee of elected officials. We have a chance for every elected or every municipality and their planners through the Planning Technical Advisory Committee to collaborate on these goals now. We've got that structure in place. It's been there since the beginning of GMA. Historically, it was used, at least my recollection, pretty much like once every 7 or 10 years when we updated the plan. We reconstituted the steering committee, and then it was done. Our goal is to use that and the planning group as sort of an ongoing planning studio. As you've pointed out, we're on track to produce this plan, within the context of GMA, but we've recognized that there are challenges that are different from cities and counties in GMA. There are differences in counties here and counties there, just as there are similarities between Spokane and King County that we don't really always think about. If we've got that ongoing participation, it gives us a chance to really consider growth and development as a whole, which is what the intent is of GMA, rather than here's your allocation, make it fit in your boundaries. It's more now, let's look at the entire big ecosystem of economy, and where's the best place to put new industry, regardless of what side of a city boundary it's on. It's a model that is in place with the West Plains Development Authority, the PDA, S3R3, and it's been used in other areas, Twin Cities, Indianapolis, where development that goes on the city side of the line on the West Plains, the city recovers the costs of supporting that up to their limit, and then from that point on, the tax revenues are shared 50-50 from the city and the county in the West Plains area. So that partnership is possible. We partner pretty well with our city colleagues in the planner to planner version, but sometimes that gets lost and that moves into the electeds and moves into the other things. If we can keep that steering committee together, most of what's in goal 11 becomes routine. It doesn't become exceptional. It becomes a normal course of doing business, particularly since in 24, the steering committee invited both tribes onto the steering committee as voting members. And so they've historically participated in the PTAC, but now the tribes have a voting seat on the steering committee itself. So again, this kind of collaboration, putting in goals is important because we and our successors can look back and say, well, why are we doing this? Well, it's like here, because we said it was important. But the good news is it's already happened.
Scott, I have a question for clarity. And my question is that back in 2001, when we were working on this the first time around, we were really brought up to date in great knowledge of the critical areas of our area, and I'm talking about. And it was before, I know 3 cities have now formulated since then. And of course, I'm really concerned to hear how they are participating in abiding by the critical area study that we had done back then. And are they participating in that, or are they going to take the lead? Because my problem is the aquifer is a floating subject and it goes downhill. And I don't know what Liberty Lake is doing, and I don't know what the city of Spokane Valley is going to be doing, and I don't know what Area Heights is going to be doing with some of these critical areas. And are they going to be as concerned as we were at the time of the sensitivity of them that we were shown? Because I don't think they've become lesser, maybe greater.
That's a fair question, Clyde, and I don't have a direct answer, but kind of a circumstantial one. All of the community plans must be in conformance with the county plan. So, and under GMA, the county is seen as a regional government, and that's why all these plans, that's why so much of the edge planning and growth authority falls to the county rather than individual cities fighting it out. So if the county is adopting a comp plan critical areas ordinance, at least on paper, everybody it's kind of like the building codes. You can adopt the state codes and you can amend those codes, but you can only make them more restrictive. You can't make them less restrictive. And so our interpretation of this would be, if a community wanted to do something that was inconsistent with the county plan, it would have to be more protective rather than less protective. I don't know if we have any authority to enforce that, or if it would take a state organization like Commerce or Ecology or Fish and Wildlife to say, you're not doing what you agreed to in this countywide plan. So I can't answer you as to how it would be done, but at least on paper, there's a mechanism to say we're in this together. Second part, though, is we've initiated an update to the coordinated water system plan, which hasn't been done since the 1990s, 99. And it, in a sense, the purveyors haven't really changed. There's still 91 water providers in Spokane County. It's an enormous number. But their boundaries have changed. Some of their water rights have changed dramatically, especially those, most of them that do not draw water from the Spokane Valley Rest and Prairie Aquifer. And so we're getting that up to date. And then the second round of that will be the water rights issue. Who's got what water right? Where is it going to be used? How do we plan for that? How do we plan for an area and know that it can be supplied by water? And then ultimately, is it going to be connected to the county's wastewater system? So there are some tools out there that we can use to bring the communities to the table. It's been a pretty rewarding process for the comp plan. The steering committee has worked really pretty well in the last 5 years. So I'm optimistic we can keep using that forum going forward, where the electeds will talk to each other and the planners are sitting around the back listening and then take direction from that.
Thank you.
Meg?
Well, I want to, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Are there any other comments on collaboration? And Scott, I'm tracking that we'll add something about that steering committee of local towns as a policy to advance ongoing collaboration on climate element work. A comment you made earlier. I think so. Okay, are there any other comments on this goal? So, well, I just want to go back and synthesize. I did take notes while you all were providing comment. And as for next steps on the goals and policies, my team will take your input and do a little workshopping of our goals and policies and bring back some red line edits to staff who can share along with you. My understanding of this conversation is that overall, it seems like there's some strong support for where the direction of the goals and policies are, although there are some suggestions for refining, tweaking, getting a little more specific in some of the actions, for example, around water mitigation measures in summertime, water conservation measures during drought, water conservation measures on county property, including parks, some specifics around the food supply chain. So there's some specific tweaks we'll make and just some consolidating and cleaning up of that. And now I want to bring us to the implementation slide. This is worth a robust discussion by you all, and that the climate element alone is, as I mentioned, a 20-year strategy and long-range plan. And all we've done here is sort of identify some initial implementation ideas for your feedback. And as for like, how will the county start putting this into action? We, Cascadia Consulting, it's not part of our project with the county to develop a robust implementation plan. I do think that would be a really great next step to operationalize a lot of this. So right now we're just looking at what you think would be important high-level priority actions. And so we've suggested a few for you all to consider. Under greenhouse gas emission short-term ones, it's implementing existing transportation, energy, vehicle electrification, solid waste plans, identifying steps to reduce emissions from county fleet and buildings, tracking VMT and greenhouse gas emissions and monitoring progress, initiating review of development and land use codes around solar, and developing a greenhouse gas implementation plan. And the long-term building capacity for infill, compact, and transit-oriented development, and supporting carbon sequestration, low carbon industries, and energy efficiency initiatives. And then similarly in the resilient short term, you can see what we're really recommending is that to develop a climate resilience implementation plan and to track and monitor measures. So what I'd like to hear from you all today is what, if you have suggestions for clarifying, making this more specific, et cetera. And I heard that one of our counselors had some ideas on this slide, so I'd love to start with you.
I just want this to be longer, but I take your point that the developing an implementation plan is a job of itself. And so I appreciate that that is one of the tasks that needs to be done here or is recommended to be done here. But yeah, I wish that this section was longer. Like maybe if it at least went to the end of the current page that it's on. But of course that includes developing like 10 more implementation recommendations here. And then but otherwise I think these are pretty good. They're mostly like, do the things we already said we're going to do. And put some onus on the county to track itself better, think about its own usages. And so for the most part, this seems like the kinds of things that could get done in 3 to 5 years. Yeah, I mostly support this, just wish it was more robust and understand that that is a separate process.
This is Melissa. I do want to point out that I really appreciate including Firewise practices. I wish we could require that. But it's just having it in here is very helpful and kind of points us in the direction of we need to do a better job of making sure we do have a Firewise community. I think that monitoring and evaluation is a part of any good planning document. So I agree this is a start, but to Logan's point, I mean, it's not actually your charge right now to develop a really detailed implementation plan. I mean, it's implied that it needs to be done. So hopefully we'll see, some maybe supporting document with a comprehensive plan that speaks to this. Maybe when it goes to the Board of County Commissioners, it could accompany that procedure. So, because there was definitely a lot in the goals and policies that you were outlining for us that not all of this touches on. I think that it can be done though, as a next step by county planning staff or consultants. So thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm hearing the call along both of you for a wish for a more robust implementation plan. And I agree. A lot of what would take to actually operationalize these goals and policies is a plan that would identify, for example, staff leads, resources, the very specific next steps. So I understand this is only like a very initial like step in that direction. And Scott and Graham would love to talk to you about supporting you in being able to develop a fuller implementation plan.
I do recognize that a lot of these plans don't even have this, so I do
Right, yeah.
appreciate even this. Often it just ends with the last policy and then that's it. It goes to the addendum. So I do appreciate that even this is here.
Well, I want to appreciate the robust conversation that you all have had today. I do have lots of great edits and suggestions to work on integrating into this climate element to tighten it, make it more specific, and make sure it's as comprehensive as possible. And so that's the first line there. Element will be refined to reflect Planning Commission comments. And then the plan is Scott and Graham will be in touch with the Board of County Commissioners in February to get their input. And then this will be folded into the entire comprehensive plan, which will eventually come back to you all for final review and final comment and recommendation. So that's the next steps. What I will promise to be in touch with Scott and Graham within the next few weeks with our revised climate element, and they will share that with you. Scott and Graham, is there anything else that you want to share about this?
Meg, no, thank you. It was very helpful. We had, I think, a good discussion and appreciate your help guiding us through this in your facilitation. So we will be in touch.
And don't know if that, I'll turn it back to the meeting facilitator. I think that concludes the end of the climate element discussion. And I don't know if
Thank you
there are
very
other
much.
things the rest in the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, Public testimony is
Any-
permitted.
Of course.
We have a couple yellow slips here. I also want to be mindful of anybody who's online that may want to talk. The first one we received was from Julia McHugh. Julia, would you like to come forward, please? Talk about climate.
Julia McHugh, West Plains, Palisades neighborhood. I was hoping that the consultant could hear this. I don't know if she signed off, but I want to note that within the vulnerability assessment in the water and environmental resources category, it talks about the Spokane Valley Raton Prairie Aquifer. It does not even mention the West Plains Aquifer, which we know are two distinct, discrete, and very different behaviored water sources, drinking water sources. But that is a pretty glaring omission. Also, I saw no or read or heard a mention on impacts or vulnerability to water quality or water quantity. We have both those issues, not just here, but elsewhere. You probably know that the Deer Park has shut down a municipal well due to contamination. The city of Cheney has shut down a municipal well due to PFAS contamination. So I'm not just speaking to the West Plains. Okay, I want you to know that. I am concerned about our entire county as a faithful taxpayer and a very privileged resident. Also, I'd like to say that a number of things that I noted on these goals, but the first, it struck me, goal 10, why isn't that goal 1? Because if we don't have clean water, we don't have breathable air, we don't have soil that we can trust to grow our crops, there are no replacements for that. So if we don't have that, how do we get to enjoy all the rest of it? All goals 1 through 9. So I'll just go through the goals, my notes from the goals, and I will also mention, not as a means of anything other than I want you to know I'm not just talking out of my hat. This has the greenhouse gas element with the 5 million metric tons. So in order to ameliorate or lessen that, we're looking at carbon capture. And in order to capture carbon, you need vegetation and you need soil. The more you pave, the more you build, the less soil, the less vegetation you have. So there we have a function of reducing greenhouse gases is stop building out, use what we've got, reuse, repurpose, retrofit the many, many thousands of square feet that we've got. And I would encourage with this surprising and really gratifying collaboration that Mr. Chesney was just talking about, please see about dissolving the lines between city and county. Yes, the Spokane Valley Mall, the Sears building, which is really an alarming ghost town, is in the city of Spokane Valley. Spokane County has multiple strip malls everywhere that are vacant, primarily vacant. There's, the holdout business owners here and there, but dissolve the boundaries between the city and the county. Is that for me? I thought that there was time to speak to many things here. Could I just have a few more minutes? Thank you kindly. Carbon capture. I went to considerable expense to do a designated forest land plan, which is available to property owners with forest lands that you basically promise to keep it in forest land, and that thereby reduces your real estate taxes. That's an expensive process, but it's worth going through, and then it does serve to conserve land and prevent subdividing, where sometimes subdividing happens, whether we like it or not. Also, low energy production data centers. I'm tracking those myself. They're high. They take a lot of energy. They use a lot of water. Sadly, they're effluent. What the water comes in, it doesn't go out the same way. It contains mercury and sadly also contains PFAS. We are reckoning with that all over the place. Eastern Oregon has a big one that they're sweating. There's mercury. So data centers are an answer to AI and energy, but they're not an answer to our environment or our recyclable water. Land use, the rural character, maintaining rural character, you can certainly improve transit use. I rarely see a bus. I've never seen a bus that's full. The most I've ever seen on the STA are people going out to Eastern. Okay, so they're commuter students, but the bus system is an anachronism from start to finish. And I'm sorry to hear they took the top off the last one recently. If you want to know about vegetation cover, you can check with Department of Natural Resources from year X to current year, and you will see a massive loss of vegetative cover, which of course is carbon capture, which of course is air filtration, which is of course groundwater infiltration. So there's a lot of that we need more of. Also, I've participated, paid the money to do the Firewise project on my property, which has reduced the burnable stuff. And there's a lot of timberland all over this county where we have failing drought and beetle infested trees. And we have a massive fire hazard just on the way out to the airport that I've spoken with them about. And Department of Transportation, dead, dying stuff on the ground. It's all fire material. Encouraging composting. You're not correct that we've taken care of our garbage problem. 1/3 of the tonnage that goes into the plant, 1/3 of that tonnage comes out as ash and is shipped to a landfill in north central Oregon. So we have not solved our garbage problem at all. Not to mention the garbage that's in our rural neighborhoods on a daily and hourly basis. Tires, left behind motorhomes, all kinds of goodies that we get to pick up and put and pay for in our own garbage. Safety, conserving open space, stormwater. You mentioned, Scott, S3R3 Solutions. It is a city, county, and airport public development authority established in 2017 when the airport knew and Fairchild made it very public that we have massive amounts of PFAS. But S3R3 Solutions' mission is to develop the 9,000 acres around the airport for Amazons and other types of operations. They also have 300 acres of wetlands, which when those wetlands are filled, the water goes somewhere, and that water collects the contaminants and heads downhill. I happen to live downhill. There are more than 4,000 domestic wells, private wells on the West Plains. 57% of those wells, at least, are contaminated. I just gave this to Mr. Edwards, who kindly asked me about my well. I'd like to I think I've given this to each of you at some point in the past, but I'll give it to Rona, and we can get the PDF to you. We also have the waste to energy plant out there, and we have the air emissions from there. And if you cite down the emission trail, which is typically from the southwest to the northeast, you will see a very long string of dead ponderosa pine trees. So they do have scrubbers. They are tracking their emissions. They monitor it all the time, but there are still problems there. And as Mr. Camporial mentioned, we may be having serious policy and regulatory issues in the future. Also, ag lands. Our State Department of Health tested, of their own volition, tested eggs, chicken meat, pork, beef. And they advised every farmer on the West Plains whom they tested, and they're coming back for another test this spring. They advised every one of them to stop selling their products. I cannot sell or give away the hazelnuts I planted 25 years ago. I no longer grow a garden. So Mr. Edwards asked, well, what can he do to help us? Buy me some food, which was really, it wasn't a funny joke at all, but it was a joke. I can afford my food, but a lot of families out there rely on their gardens and they can no longer garden because of the water. So as far as unintended consequences, they are numerous. They are numerous, and you can't ignore them on the West Plains or up in Deer Park or down at Cheney. So one of the things I'd like to suggest that is included in this process is that certain things get onto a regular monitoring system. We do not monitor the wastewater treatment plants. Airway Heights has refused to have their wastewater treatment plant tested for PFAS, which they're pumping it, releasing hundreds of thousands of gallons. So I could go on and on. You've done your darndest here. Thank you for your attention. But I'm here to tell you that there's a whole lot more under the surface from goal 10 alone that really needs addressing up front, not at the tail end of things. But thank you. Thank you very much for your attention and your endurance.
I just want to point out that the word water quality appears in 3 of the goals and at least 2 of the policies.
Thank you, Ms. McHugh. Let's do Paul and then we'll do Eric over here. Eric has a card too.
Hello, everyone. Paul Kropp here, Moraine
Hi,
Prairie.
Paul.
I know it's late or it's early or however you want to look at it. I have just 2 things. One, firstly, is to compliment the staff and the consultant on this exercise. It has been spectacular, and as good a work as I could ever have imagined and have ever seen before. So thank you all for that. I did participate a bit, but it's really the crew that participated on the TAC and the consultant and the staff that made this thing happen. So there's that. The other thing is, I do want to make a comment about Goal 8, and I'd like to submit it. But is it possible for the public to do that now directly to the staff and consultant?
Paul, of course, yes, you can email it directly to Rona or me.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much. And
Could I ask a question, Paul? Paul, could you just describe, I'm in this letter, I couldn't find it yet and couldn't read it, but could you just describe the committee's overall take? It sounded like you were very happy with the work and the ultimate product. Is that the general consensus of the committee per your understanding?
There was an exercise where the committee was actually polled about it. So yes, there was an exercise to achieve what the tax goal was, which was consensus.
Question?
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Eric has filled out a yellow slip. Climate goals, shows right here. Paul, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
So you all have my testimony. We've been here for 3 hours. I want to be respectful of your time. So if you can read it, and I'll ask Rona to please post it on the internet for everyone to be able to review. But otherwise, I will cede my time.
Okay. Anybody else on the line? Just didn't want to miss anybody. Okay, great. Well, that was quite an informative session today. Thank you very much for everyone's kind attention. Next order of business, approval of amendments of January the 15th. They've been sent to you. Hopefully you've read them. Are there any questions, additions, errata that we need to deal with? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt those minutes of January the 15th. So moved by Clyde. Your second? Second by Pete. All discussion on the motion? For discussion, all those in favor of adopting those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying no. Those minutes are hereby adopted. Staff report.
Very briefly,
Thank you, sir.
Commissioners, we distributed last time what we're calling an advance agenda. And it's a bit of a roadmap of where we're going for the rest of the year. We hope you find that useful. If you have any suggestions, questions, requests, send them to us directly, and we will take that into account as we put agendas together. Next time, you will be having a chance, you will be doing the public hearing on the tax parcel adjustment changes that'll be presented by our staff. And we're going to walk you through a number of the legislative changes that have happened over the last couple of sessions that directly impact Spokane County. And some of those are wrapped into our comp plan, and some of them are standalone. But there's been a number of things that the legislature has pushed on cities and counties. We're going to give you a summary of that and get your feedback and see how we should proceed. With that, Mr. Chairman, we are done.
Could I ask one question? Was that an advance agenda sent via email or just in paper last time? I didn't see it in an email. If I did, I missed it. And I was online last time. So if you would send it to me, I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And by the way, just as a kind of a thing, it's a bit of a living document. So we will send that out periodically, like a week or so ahead of every meeting. You can kind of see on a rolling list where we're going.
Yeah, advance agendas are just made for changing for sure.
Yes, formally like to say I will not be here until the middle of April. I'm gone. I will do my best to be in contact or through Zoom or Teams, whatever. I don't know what you're using. So I'm gone.
Turn your mic off. Okay. No, that was for Eric, so you could add all that time. Okay, any other comments from the commission?
We got our whole business meeting done in Eric's testimony time. I like that. I like that.
Thank you, Eric. We owe you. All right. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Pete, second by Lonnie. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same sign no. We're hereby adjourned. It is 12 noon. Thank you, everyone. Great discussion. And these minutes are signed. Thank you, Eric.